Good morning, everybody. Is it too early yet, or can we get started with a smooth panel? First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Franziska Heintel. I work for the Ethereum Foundation, mainly in the Solidity team, and I'm super excited to be here today and to host this panel with all of these amazing speakers. As you heard, this panel will be about infrastructure and security, and yes, that is a very broad topic. So I'm excited that we have like a nice selection of different people sitting here today that are all experts in their fields. And so what I would like to do with this panel today is to have it as like interactive as possible so that you guys also get as much out of this as possible. So while like we introduce ourselves, and I of course also prepared some questions to get started, I want you all to already start thinking about what kinds of things you would want to ask the speakers or the panelists in this case about infrastructure and security. But before we do that, we will get started with some introductions. So I would ask all of you guys to briefly explain who you are, what you're doing, and also maybe what your project or company does as well. And we're going to start with Richard.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for for starting the panel. So I'm Richard. I'm doing most of the technical coordination of the SAFE project, or the Gnosis SAFE project. And the idea, or what we want to achieve with our project, is that we want to push forward the smart contract-based account standards, and that we want to make this real standard inside the Ethereum ecosystem, because we believe in that this is how we can thrive towards more adoption and bringing more flexibility, also an improvement in the user experience. And we are trying to engage more with the community and pushing this forward.
Hey guys, I'm Modit. I'm the CISO at Polygon right now. I come from a traditional security background, so I've done pen testing and stuff like that about a decade ago. More recently, I've been doing blockchain security, and at Polygon, mixing them both together to hopefully make a secure Web3.
Hello, I'm Neville, a co-founder of DDoB. We offer smart contract security audits, and of course, we also offer tooling and other infrastructure for security. So I have a mixed research and also software engineering background. I still actually teach at university. And we also do the smart contract audits using our technology, and we can actually find real vulnerabilities in projects that have been deployed with almost $1 billion in TVL. Thank you.
Is this one? All right. This is on also. Yes, okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan Alexander. I'm CTO at OpenZeppelin and co-founder of Forda. At OpenZeppelin, we worked a few years ago on GSN, decentralized approach to gas station networks and relayers. Forda is decentralized monitoring. So we are concerned with and working on different solutions that we need as part of our infrastructure and security, and trying to figure out how they can be decentralized.
Hello, everyone. My name is Xing Shu. I'm from IOSG Ventures. We are a crypto-native investment firm. So, for example, we invested in Hasto Finance, runtime verification. I also work closely with the runtime verification guys sitting on their board. My own background, initially cybersecurity research, and then actually built two infrastructure projects. One was Zilliqa, a layer 1 sharding blockchain, and then the second one was a staking infrastructure service provider. So, very happy to be here today talking about infra security.
Amazing. Thank you all for the introductions. So I would suggest that we start with a couple of direct questions that I'm going to direct to all of you guys. Starting off with Mudit. I mean, you are really an Ethereum OG. You were also very involved in the Gurley network and in many other cool things. So really appreciate that. And I would want to ask you something from the user perspective. So most dApp users today connect their wallets and applications by default to centralized RPC providers like Alchemy or Infura. And what do you think, why are we so dependent on those providers? what are the risks that are involved, and is there a way that we can get rid of this traditional server-client dependency?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go in reverse, I guess. The light clients were a nice idea, or is a nice idea to actually remove this dependency. You can, one day you would be able to run a light client just within your MetaMask instance, for example, and have full decentralization, no need to depend on any RPC node. There was a lot of work being done on light clients like 5 years ago, not so much these days, just because people hit practical limitations with light clients. There just aren't enough full nodes in the network to support the load of probably like hundreds or thousands of light clients that would be needed if everyone started using them. So we are still a bit far from that, but hopefully like we know what can be done, and eventually it will happen. In the meantime, we need to find some like middle ground. So right now, MetaMask almost always uses Infura. A bunch of folks for their dApps use Alchemy, and these are the two main solutions. It's not a very critical problem because a malicious RPC node can't modify your transactions. What they can do is they can censor you, so they can prevent you from doing transactions, or they can return you wrong data, so you may like be fooled into doing something else. So for example, if you, I don't know, go to a new application, the RPC node might tell you like, hey, you have this airdrop available, sign this data to claim this airdrop, and it might end up being like you might end up signing something else completely. The reality is like 99% of the users don't really see what they are signing if they are on a trusted application. And even if the application is trusted but the RPC node is malicious, it can sort of trick you in certain ways. One way to avoid this would be to use multiple RPC nodes in an aggregated form. So Deshackle comes to mind. They are doing RPC aggregation. Something like that can be built into MetaMask. So what MetaMask can do is whenever it sends out a transaction, it can send it out to multiple RPC nodes rather than one, to reduce your chance of being censoring. When it reads data from the RPC nodes, it can read it from multiple nodes and see if they vary. And stuff like this. So this, I feel like, can be a good intermediary step that can happen within the next few months. And then hopefully, eventually, we'll get light clients in our browsers as well.
Okay, interesting. Also, because I want to make this a conversation, feel free. I know we already only have 2 mics, but feel free to react to what Mudit just said. And all of these mics will, I think, turn on if you start talking. So any other thoughts on those RPC providers?
I mean, I find the RPC providers also very interesting, or in general, the centralized architecture. When you think about also the mobile topic, I mean, this is also when it comes to how do we interact with Web 3 and how is it different from Web 2. I think Web 2 is in a state where mobile is predominant, where Web 3 mobile is still far off. I mean, we have a couple players in the ecosystem who try to push it very hard, but especially there, it's like you cannot run a node on your mobile. Like you can. It's nice in the winter, it's warm, but that's not the purpose, right? And I think also there you have, like currently we have no other way than to rely on these centralized RPCs, and you want to do as little requests as possible. So just saying, hey, we fire to 10 RPC nodes and aggregate is not really viable for mobile. And so I think there it becomes more and more important that we really think about, okay, like I know that there are already projects where should we provide a proof with a response that you show that your response is actually a valid response. But I think there's still quite some way to go before we really can solve this. And this will become more important to really establish also this mobile default that we have in Web 2, also in Web 3.
I just wanted to add briefly that I think naturally speaking, there will also be tiering of different levels, security, availability, assurance, right? So if I'm just doing like a very simple application without involving a large amount of financial assets, not much value involved, maybe I can just use, any of these performant RPC server. But if I'm an application that involves a lot of TVL, things like that, sometimes if you look at exchanges, for example, they will certainly run their own infrastructure. So we have a spectrum of reliance on third parties, and to the extreme, I run my own infrastructure, which I have higher assurance. I think according to your security budget, in a sense, there might be different tiering as well.
Yeah, Xing Shu, I would like to stay with you for a while and ask you the next question. So speaking of central points of failure, the recent hack of the Ronin Bridge, which was allegedly conducted by the Lazarus North Korean hacker group, raises the question for me, how do we secure cross-chain bridges? Do we have to fundamentally rethink how we design the bridging technology?
Yes, I think so. And first of all, I think we are in this very unfortunate state where many, if not most, major cross-chain bridges have been hacked, and sometimes in a very significant way. So this is very unfortunate. We have to do something fundamental. Speaking of central points of failure, I think bridges are not designed mostly to be central points of failure. There are many different mechanisms to ensure it's more decentralized, distributed. But what happened was that sometimes a small mistake replicated by all these different validators or nodes running by the same institution would cause this kind of central point of failure. I think one thing we have to look at is that what is our practice in securing such bridges. I think sometimes some teams are still having a very traditional view of this. One is that I can do anything. I'm a good engineer, so that's why I know security. I can build my own bridges. Unfortunately, this may not be the case. Having good experience in software development may not mean that you have a good idea and good practice in cybersecurity. And the second thing is that I think we still have this very static view of code security. We have a major revision, so we do security audit. Maybe we do 2 to 3 audits, and then all good, we come back and then we deploy. But many things are missing in this static process. Actually, one is that usually people only do security audits at major releases. In between that may be some small changes and sometimes parameter changes or configuration changes, which were considered by the team to be minor and turn out to be not minor, right? And the second thing is that even when professional security auditing firms are saying this is okay, that is acceptable, their conclusion on these potential issues are usually based on a lot of preconditions, assumptions. And these conditions and assumptions probably are actually held when you are doing the audit, but things might have changed thereafter. So I think we need to have a continuous mechanism to dynamically monitor all these things, whether it's code change, anything that hasn't been properly scrutinized now gets deployed in the contract. That's something that needs to be triggered for more scrutiny. And any changes, especially in configurations and DevOps practices, that could have violated certain preconditions of the previous security audits. I think these things also need to trigger certain alerts. I think we just have to have all this kind of dynamic and continuous mechanism to look at security, including code, including configuration, including the way people are interacting with the systems. And I think if we can take one step back, right? All these things we have been looking at, talking about, or happen in the Wild West are about certain specific technical problems with the implementation or configuration of the bridges. We have not reached a stage where we have, I think, for example, systematically looked at some of the high-level assumptions of these bridges, right? So sometimes, even if the code is perfect, the configuration is fine, but we are assuming that the validators are not going to do bad things because of economic or reputational reasons. So I feel that these things are maybe less urgent, but they are very significant in the long run as well. We need to look at all these things. If you look at certain new bridges, their designs are not completely based on, let's say, very traditional kind of security assumptions, but on a lot of new assumptions that have not been proven. Yeah, that's something I want to bring at the last point as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think, first of all, the craziest thing about the Ronin hack was that it took 6 days for the team to realize, and there were additional funds at risk at that time, although most of the funds had been drained. So this goes to, first of all, just having basic good practices. If we're going to have bridges, which we clearly are, and they are even more than some of the vaults we've seen, they're going to hold tremendous amount of value. And we obviously have to have good practice around monitoring, detecting issues, and having response. And the other thing that I think needs to be given more thought is defensive measures on bridges and honestly vaults as well against exploits, because unexpected exploits may be triggerable. In the case of Ronin, it's very complicated to defend against if your validators are colluding or compromised. But there are other exploits we've already seen, and if community-based funds are all at risk from a single attacker, that's kind of not acceptable to the community. So I think we all have to work together not only on, so monitoring is one additional thing, and we are seeing, by the way, a lot of the bridge implementers now taking this seriously in terms of understanding some of these risks, but I think we have to think about defensive measures, auto triggers, circuit breakers that might stop community losses.
So if I could summarize and also add something to that. I mean, bridges, the special thing about them is that they attract tremendous amounts of TVL. And now, as opposed to, say, for instance, an AMM like Curve, they also have a more broad attack surface. Okay, so naturally, these hacker groups can afford to spend months, analyzing these projects. And so how do you protect against that? Well, you need more rigorous audits. You need to, every code change, there needs to be a little more checking about it. So I know that sometimes, audits are conducted, sometimes there's formal verification, and then there's a change, contract gets redeployed. You need this continuous security assessment process throughout the entire project's lifetime. And the other thing is there's much more than code audits involved. There's game theory, there's cryptographic audits, and other things as well.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with you there for a second, Neville. So you are a co-founder and also security engineer at DDoB, right? And you offer audits, but also several other security services. And I know that you also have this cool contract library. So I would be interested in hearing a little bit more about that, what basically you can see in this library, and also generally hear more about what you just touched upon. So basically, what do you think about smart contract security, and how do you think it can be improved?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So contract library actually came up as an idea because we started doing program analysis research specifically for the Ethereum blockchain back in 2018. And then one of the first things we realized we needed was a decompiler which can create a sort of an intermediate representation which is amenable to further security analysis. And then we deployed contract library to demonstrate that it is possible to decompile most of the contracts out there and actually analyze them when they are actually deployed. Okay, so I guess that's the core part of contract library. It's a decompiler and also a security analysis toolchain which runs like 50 or 60 different analyses nowadays. Some of them more sophisticated. The sophisticated analyses are actually not publicly accessible because we use the results of those analyses to find either vulnerabilities in the projects that we're monitoring or in other projects as well, for hunting bug bounties, for instance. Okay, so naturally we cannot have all of those results publicly available. The other thing we started building then was a blockchain explorer. But it's not a blockchain explorer like Etherscan, which is targeted for normal users. So it's not a popular explorer. This one has a data representation internally, which is specifically designed for running the sort of security queries that we need to do in order to find vulnerabilities at scale. And so now we can combine static analysis results Blockchain Explorer results. Even things like very small internal transactions and the effects on that, we have access to combine all the information together to get very good reports. Now, eventually, we started also integrating debugging tools. And again, these debugging tools are meant for security analysts, not developers, because these debugging tools are meant to debug contracts that you have not written or contracts which have no source code. So if you want a debugger which is more tailored to a developer, maybe some of the other debuggers out there are better. This is more tailored to people like us. Okay, so we actually use these every day. Finally, the other thing we have is Watchdog, which combines all of this into a package, which then also combines security auditing, and it's useful for continuous monitoring of protocols. Now, the security, you asked me also what's my opinion on the security space. So I think as time goes on, we're seeing more and more products coming out, and some of these products will die, some of these products will survive. Okay, the thing about the Ethereum space is that everything is kind of like not production ready, if you think about it. Like even the main Solidity compiler, there's still a few bugs out there. Sometimes not everything is 100% as it should be. The language is always evolving. So even something as basic as the Solidity compiler still has some more work in progress. So yeah, that's my opinion. I think that security monitoring will be more and more popular apart from audits. Also, security monitoring is cheaper. In the long run, it's going to be cheaper, and then it's also more available as security auditors are booked months in advance.
Maybe one thing also why I think this whole monitoring is very important is one of the main advantages or fun things to work with the Ethereum community is because everything is so open and can be built upon each other, right? Like you can combine everything and it's very nice. And even if something is not production ready, it might be a core piece other people are building upon, right? And then if this core piece suddenly fails or has something in there that is a bug, it might pull down other parts, right? Like the recent example would be that the Omni bridge for formerly XDAI, now Gnosis Chain, had this weird callback in the token standard that they have, which allowed to drain some funds from an exchange. And also there, I think it becomes important that we have standards like OpenZeppelin, where we have standard libraries that we can use. That I think yesterday there was a panel on formal verification where they talked about having like really formal specification for certain token standards, and then have continuous monitoring, right? Like because we want to know if something like this comes in, or if we have debugging tools that can show us, okay, where is the difference? Where is this token standard different? Because we want to combine all these tools, and if we cannot understand all the code and the tools, it becomes very hard to say, okay, we can securely combine these and build upon each other.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, let's stay with the monitoring topic for a second. Jonathan, you at OpenZeppelin are, busy building all kinds of stuff in the security and also automation products, besides the very, very popular OpenZeppelin contracts, of course. What's your opinion on smart contract automation and also on monitoring tools? And do you think that they can, add to security overall? And are there any trade-offs?
Well, I absolutely think that as the prior conversations we're just alluding to, we can't count on audits to catch everything. We can't count on secure coding or the use of templates to eliminate issues. And we all know that because of composability and the interaction of the smart contracts, there are many effects that we can't anticipate or are actually triggered by market events or situations that, again, we may not have been able to fully anticipate in coding, catch in testing, or eliminate in or through audits and code reviews. So, as part of as part of what we're all working on to try to reduce risks, reduce losses, increase security and reliability, we absolutely need monitoring. I don't think there's any question about that. I think we all have to work on, I think that it starts with development, because like one of the things we try to do very thoroughly in OpenZeppelin contracts is ensure that there's really good and clear and thorough event emission for everything that happens. So if you're using the contracts, you're kind of automatically getting the benefit of something that can help with monitoring. If we don't monitor these things, if we don't understand our operations, then obviously we're not taking advantage of it. But it does start with the coding. It starts, security in production starts with planning in coding, in design and development, and they go together. But a lot of it is, a lot of what we're talking about is not just security and threat detection. A lot of it is operational reliability, which reliability of our systems is closely connected to the security and usefulness, and downtime can actually be itself have huge impact and risk. So I think, you know, we all have to think about the operational issues and the value of monitoring and operations. And you know, when we talk about infrastructure, you know, there is a question, what is the infrastructure? Because it's not just the node, it's not just the blockchain nodes. It's when our users are using bridges, when they're using vaults, when we're using decentralized storage, this is all part of the infrastructure that we have to care about and we have to monitor.
Yeah, agree. Okay, and now talking about this decentralization versus centralization aspect, that of course also comes with trade-offs when we talk about UX. I think this is also the reason why we're basically in the moment stuck in this weird kind of, some call it worse version of Web 2, because we just try to rebuild Web 2 into Web 3 and try to make it a little bit decentralized, but then again, it's, you know, not good for UX, so we compromise again. And here I want to ask Richard a question, because you are really building like a user-facing product with Safe. And why do you think we are in this weird like position of stuck in the Web 2 world with bad UX stage? Like, why are we not sufficiently decentralized yet? But also, what do you think we can do to improve the UX while further decentralizing the infrastructure aspect and not compromising on security?
So let's first, why are we still stuck there? I think we start out with, right, like at least most of the people here, we believe in this, oh, you have control, it's self-custodial, you don't have to trust anyone. But if we think about for whom are we writing the products, it's often not these people who say, hey, we need to be fully in control. They like that Web 2 is easy and that they can trust this one party, right? Like, and these two then start clashing. And if you write a product that is fully decentralized, that where you have full control, if you take full control, you have full responsibilities. If you have an EOA, right, like, and you lose the key or expose access to this key, your funds are gone. There is no Ethereum committee that then says, sure, yeah, here are your funds back. There was a bad part. I mean, you can try to convince all the miners, but a little bit tricky. And then this clashing, and where you then start going and, okay, we want to provide a little bit of this, and therefore we say, hey, let's make this custodial central services, or because we, you know, what we had before with the RPC nodes, obviously the best would be that everybody gets their own service running, use tools like DebNode or something, but it's a hassle. Who wants to do this just to do a transaction, right? Like, and then we start centralizing certain pieces, and it becomes more because for mobile we need more. And then at the end we are like, okay, we are in this in-between state, which is then we take the worst of both worlds, right? Like, and I think to get out of this, I mean, long term, there's a lot of technical foundation still missing. I mean, I think the biggest part, or one of the biggest parts, will be what we talked in the beginning. That you need light clients, you need stuff that you can spin up an RPC or some access to blockchain ad hoc that provides you a reliable source for the data. And I think then the other point is also that this transformation from this pure web-based version again to the mobile version, and in empowering this will bring a lot more users to Web3. Short term, I believe that smart contracts-based wallets can cover some of the problems. Obviously, I mean, it's a project I'm working on, so it's but because also I believe that using smart contract wallets such as Argent and the Safe, right? Like you can have recovery mechanisms, you can have certain access controls, you can have automation, which users are used to from the Web2 world, and here you can improve tremendously the UX. But also there are a lot of challenges there, right? Like, I mean, we talked about contract security, monitoring, and actually smart contract-based wallets brings a challenge. Normal protocols, you need to monitor one contract. We cannot expect every user to monitor their own smart contract wallet. It's a big, and all of this needs to evolve, and we can try to provide these tools in the beginning, like as a, it's said that Pedro is not here because actually Wallet Connect tried to do this, right? Like where they, at the backbone, they have Waku as their decentralized networking layer, but they start building convenience services on top of this that provide some extractions, but theoretically everybody can use the decentralized Waku layer to interact with these convenience services, right? Like, so we start out with like this hybrid centralized and decentralized version, and then still rely very heavily on this, and then try to progressively take out the centralized part and only rely on the decentralized part. But there's still a lot of steps to do.
I can add a little to that. So in this space, there are a bunch of areas where there is a lot of centralization. Some are hard to remove, but some are relatively easy. For example, like for each one specifically, Geth is the leading client. Almost everybody uses Geth, and it would be like bad if there was a bug in Geth or a backdoor was inserted into Geth. Like, I'm not sure how many people actually carefully review every Geth upgrade they do. So that's one attack vector. Then the stable coins, Tether, Circle, both are, I think, US entities, and the reality is, like, if either one of them pushes for a fork of Ethereum, most of the DeFi would just move there. The current chain might just become the Ethereum Classic if it doesn't fork. Then mining pools, obviously, I think 2 mining pools control more than 51% of hash power, 2 entities. All of these things people can help into, like you can start using other stable coins, you can start mining with different pools. Then obviously Flashbots comes to mind. I think they have 85% or 90% of network hash power almost in their control. So that's a single point of failure. From business perspective, I don't know like what would be an alternative to using Flashbots, but yeah, that's one area where more competition can come in. Obviously, we have that Vitalik's masternode in his basement. So there are a bunch of things that can be changed.
Okay, and with that, I would like to open up for questions from the audience. Yeah, do we have a mic somewhere?
Yes. Okay, cool. Following up what you're talking about with like Pedro's Wallet Connect living off of Waku, and that being somewhat of an interim solution. Like the way we see it, its status in Waku is like I don't know. I've been trying to use this analogy. Maybe it's not appropriate, but you can see Wallet Connect is kind of like a Coinbase to Bitcoin in the early days. Is they're trying to build more centralized infrastructure for convenience into the interim of, until there's something like Uniswap available for people to use and exit, and give people more options to not use these things because they're more comfortable with the interface of Coinbase, for lack of a better analogy. And until we have more people using the more decentralized services and they provide the same level of like quality of service, then you can't, like it's hard for you, the new users are going to move off, they don't care, right? They're going to use whatever's going to get the job done to do the thing. And it just takes a lot of the infrastructure builders to bring up the level of quality of service so that it's somewhat comparable, but it's difficult in a fully decentralized manner because users take responsibility and ownership of their data as opposed to offloading it to someone else. Like, where do you see this, how long do you see this middle ground taking place? Because what we've seen is just a larger and larger and larger growth of these middle ground services taking more control instead of them offloading more into decentralization.
I think it depends. I think in the web world, actually, like the tools become better and better when it also comes to using more decentralized approaches like peer-to-peer networks directly from your web browser, and also like having background tasks running continuously, and you have all this utility. But also with Wallet Connect, right? Like the idea also from Wallet Connect was mobile related. I mean, this is where Wallet Connect was coming from. And in the mobile world, things are different, right? Like it's not a normal computer. You don't want to run continuous tasks. You have stuff like Apple who block certain things.
Yeah, we've tried.
And I think there it will take a lot longer. And again, this comes back to what I said in the beginning. If we think about Web 2, most of the companies by now go mobile first. They want that mobile is your predominant device. In Web 3, if you talk about mobile, it's always like, yeah, but you know, on web it's easier. We have all these JavaScript libraries and so on. And so this is why I feel like when it comes to the traditional like web depths, like there we can see, I think, a faster progress that we can do more decentralization, rely more on decentralized protocols like Waku, where we say we directly interact with Waku. But on mobile, it will take a little bit longer. And if we want to move further to mobile, therefore, they will stick around these centralized services for some time. I think it's important that you, and this is what I like about Wallet Connect, is that there is a clear path out of centralization, right? Like in the first version of Wallet Connect, you had your one centralized bridge, which was like then everybody used the example bridge from Wallet Connect, and it was constantly down and everybody was complaining. And this is obviously having this way out, I think it's a huge improvement. Even so we are not there yet taking it out, like seeing that we can get out of it, I think is already a huge step. And also seeing that Status is doing a lot of pushing in this direction, right? Like is what also we at the Safe Project, we want to put it as one of our core values that we want to push towards decentralization, and especially with smart contract wallets, it's not easy because you need tracing and event parsing, which, I mean, we can talk to other projects like The Graph, like there's also, it's a semi-centralized way, right? Like, so I think there's good progress, but it will take some time still.
More questions?
I'll throw in another one that kind of goes off of what he was talking about, which is just more generally, how do you, because we're all talking about there being more choices, more implementations, and that's more secure because you're not relying on one thing like Geth screwing up. But at what point does it get so complex that you're introducing so many choices, you're making standards kind of like herding cats? So yeah, like where's the line for, well, we want a lot of options and we want them to be open source, but at some point we also don't want to maybe go too far in that direction if it becomes more difficult, which is like, it's kind of a philosophical question, but to me the core question is ultimately what's the incentives driving more implementations versus maybe one standard implementation people can work off of it and at least not get confused?
So there's no right answer to that question. I would be super happy with 3 implementations. 8.2 has, I think, 5 or 6 right now. That would be ready by the merge, so that's super great. But 3, I think, is the sweet spot that helps you between coordination and actually pushing things forward while still being fairly decentralized. But obviously, different opinions can vary on this.
I think if we look at past couple decades of IT, different waves of technology, personal computing, client server computing, cloud computing, mobile, you know, I think that the number of people on the planet has grown considerably also, and there's plenty of room, and the needs are big enough that we will see that while there is consolidation, there's also plenty of room and need for competition, and it will exist, and it won't be completely consolidated. I think that probably it's not the time to be worrying about consolidation, because I think that at this point we're in the phase of building. We're talking about infrastructure, but we are just our infrastructure is at its infancy, right? We're layer 1, now layer 2, and layer 2 is just coming, and we have all these other things that we're building, and messaging and storage and monitoring, and and there are other pieces that we do in our smart contracts that we've been talking about that almost become potentially infrastructure services. So I think that we're going to see, we have a lot of building to do. I don't think we have to worry yet about the consolidation aspect. We need to keep building, and once we have enough of the infrastructure, then we can move off of some of the, we'll have the things we need to move off of the centralized solutions and take advantage of this infrastructure we're building. And I think it will happen, but it's going to take a little time.
Thank you.
Okay, looking at the time, I think we have to wrap up, and I want to ask one last closing question, which each of you can answer. So I want to look a little bit in the future, and I'd like you all to give your future prediction on infrastructure and security. And please keep it short, because we only have 2 minutes left. What will be the most important problem, either from your individual's project's perspective or at a bigger picture level, to solve or work on in the near-term future in order to strengthen infrastructure security?
I would start. I think, as mentioned before, I think giving everybody the power to run it, to run their own node, to run their own infrastructure, and therefore also to potentially run it on mobile is, for me, I think, one of the most important things to cover.
For me, I think the biggest problem in this space right now is ideological. Some people are very strict about security, and they want, for example, everyone to hold their own keys, while the reality is 99% of the population does not know how to actually manage their own keys. So people need to sort of bridge this gap between the real world and what the ideal solutions are.
So to me, in terms of raw infrastructure, clients is an issue. So Ethereum has 2 clients. One of the clients actually runs on a normal laptop. It doesn't run on a mobile, actually. But yeah, so other chains and heavy chains like Polygon, for instance, or BSC, the infrastructure is pretty tough to run.
I think one of our biggest challenges is how to decentralize security. Security in what we're trying to do, it won't work if a few people are in charge of security for a project or in a service or infrastructure. So how to let users be in charge of their own security is as important as users being in charge of their own privacy, and I think there's some problems to solve there.
I think, to me, one important problem to solve is to equip users with sufficient tooling for them to take charge of their security. I think they should be given choices.
Wow, okay, yeah, thank you all so much. I think we can take all of these answers as amazing call to actions for you guys in the room. I think many of you are already building on somewhat related projects, so yeah, please keep working towards this. And I want to thank all the panelists, and please give them a big round of applause.
And we do, we all want a better future. We want a more secure future. So we do have more time, given that we had a late start. So if you want to go on a second round of call to actions, we have a lot more people. Please do. If there are more audience questions on all the fantastic projects they're working on, all the thoughts, please, we do have time for questions as well. Anyone have questions, or we go do a second round of call to actions and future stuff?
There is a question over there.
So ideas are great. love ideas, love ideology, can see the perspectives on both sides of different ways people view things top down, from security to infrastructure, in the way that we want options, but then there's also the need for getting a product to market, business, right? So let me ask this question, Jinshu. Practically speaking, do you have any ideas that can turn into practical workflows, processes, implementations of how to solve some of these open-ended problems for providing people with those options?
Yes, I think I have some ideas, but certainly these are just examples, right? So for example, one thing that has been bothering many people in the crypto space is that they suddenly got their assets stolen, right? So I think there are just many reasons to such incidents. Sometimes we cannot eliminate all such attack vectors, but one thing we could do is that we can equip users with some kind of on-chain multi-sig solutions. So this has been working very well for centralized exchanges. For example, Binance now has like triple verifications required for me to withdraw assets. I need to do something in the app. I need to have like Google Authenticator. I need to have some code from my email or SMS. I think such tooling is not readily available for on-chain transactions at the moment. So I think this is something we should work on. But to me, this is just one of the many examples, right? Let's say once we have this, how do we equip users with better mechanisms to protect all these, multi-factor devices they are holding? So if they are using their phone for all the purposes, someone sends them an email with a PDF or maybe just something that looks like an image via WhatsApp, they click it, their phone gets hacked, then it will defeat the purpose of multi-sig, right? So or second factor authentication. So I think all these things need better solutions, and I also feel that many of these solutions have to be redesigned to cater to the use cases or scenarios in the crypto sense.
Let's talk more.
Thank you.
Maybe also one thing to add there. I think you have to start on all fronts, right? Like we have a lot of tools already. We have a lot of analysis tools, monitoring tools. We have multi-sigs. We have all approaches, but the UX and how do we bring them to the user is, let's say, not there yet, to be nice, right? And I mean, you could say we also need to educate the users. They need to understand what responsibilities do they have, what possibilities do they have. And then we need to work on how do we connect these tools, right? Like how could we use Tenderly to show our users what is happening, or some other monitoring tool? How can we make them that they continuously know what is happening on their account with the different tools from OpenZeppelin and the other parties that have these monitoring tools. And I think one of the very, very important topics also is like, how do we make the user like not YOLO sign? I mean, this is also a topic which Franziska was presenting in last year at a conference, where it's like really users don't understand what they're signing, right? Like we present some random hex data and then we hope that they magically know what it is. I mean, I can guess what it is. I'm a Solidity developer, but I doubt that the majority of our users are Solidity developers, right? Like, so tackling all of this is like we have to bring them together, the parts, and then we can see that users are empowered.
Well, one thing I'll just add here, I think relevant, is that this part of it goes back to that we're still building the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is immature for some of our security needs. For example, we had conversations, I think yesterday and in other things going on this week, about account abstraction coming to Ethereum, and account abstraction will enable new security capabilities for end users that we just don't have a good solution for today. And as the infrastructure is improving, it gives us the ability to deliver better security capabilities to end users and usability, but we're still building the infrastructure. So a lot of this is a moving target, getting to where we hope to be.
Okay, yeah, there's another question in the back. Do we have a mic? Or if not, I can also repeat it for the stream.
Thanks. Thanks for the panel. So I have a question. Is there any possibility for us to exploring other type of state models, such as emulating UTXO on Ethereum, on EVMs, so that someone's input wouldn't affect your state? Because a lot of hacks are because someone managed to affect everyone's state and rug pull everyone, right? So is there any kind of that direction? Is there any possibility to explore in any case? Just emulating the UTXO type of state model.
So if you want one transaction per block, per for instance, per AMM, then that's what you do. But I think it's, there's a lot of limitations, right, with the UTX model for smart contracts as we know them.
So the UTXO model just doesn't scale very much when it comes to like smart contracts and smart transactions. Even if it did, it won't matter at the end because the logic would still be mixed or shared between the assets or whatever. So for example, let's imagine a hypothetical UTXO model and an AMM in it. So the AMM would hold some tokens and people would be able to spend like one UTXO of that AMM to do a swap or something. The problem is like people might still be able to spend all of the assets held by that AMM if they can get access to all of their UTXOs. So it would still be quite convoluted. It doesn't really solve all of the problem. Even in Ethereum, there has never been and probably will never be a hack where someone is able to impersonate someone else's account. So I don't think the UTXO model would help very much in that direction.
Okay.
Maybe also, there have been in the past like projects which basically similar to how we have L2 chains, very specific to a certain use case, therefore use a different approach, how you use like potential UTXOs, UTX, that you can do this, right? Like if you want to use something on a layer 2, you could discover this, and I think in the past they were not very successful, and therefore they kind of, right now we are more on rollups and ZK Snark-based rollups rather than going into this approach where we have something similar to the Bitcoin model.
I guess my point is more like separating the state so that each output so that wouldn't be affected by other people's actions. So if you want to take other people's input, you have to merge it or something. So a bit more UX convoluted probably, but probably there's some security benefit, I guess. Yeah, just that was my question. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, there's another question over here.
Thank you. Jonathan, you mentioned decentralized security, and I would love to learn a bit more about what you envision. Like, how could that look like? What do you see in the market right now, and how does the future look?
Well, it's not a solved problem, which is why I brought it up as when asked, what's a hard problem? Well, I think there's different aspects. One is if we look at DAOs and we look at responsibility for projects, we can look at that side of it, which is kind of like who's responsible for, let's say, security decisions. We had a nice talk earlier by Martin from the Ethereum Foundation. You discover a vulnerability, you have to decide who gets to know about the vulnerability, who are we going to disclose it to, what are we going to do? How are we going to patch this? Who's making that decision? How is that decision made? How does the DAO decide how that's managed? We have that aspect of problems, and again, the more centralized that becomes, the more risks that come with it. On the other side of it, we have the users, and how do the users get security? And honestly, in the world we live in now in Web 2, and the systems we all rely on as users, we rely on the service providers for security, but that also means that we kind of live with the decisions they make and the responsibilities that they have. So you may have a financial institution that has excellent security, but they're also making the decisions as to what's your responsibility and what's their responsibility, and you don't actually have visibility as to when they determine that you're on the hook for fraud or not on the hook for fraud, or what they're going to stop and take a look at and what they're not. And you could imagine a world in which users, I think you alluded to this before, users actually get to choose kind of what level of security they want, and have control even over kind of tools that they use and rely on for their security choices, having to do with their own holdings, assets, interactions. And that's what I mean. So those two aspects are areas I think we need to work on. Yep.
Okay, are we wrapping up?
Yes, indeed. So thank you very much for chairing the panel, Francesca, and the panelists. This is as broad, this is probably the broadest topic at TrustX, because infrastructure covers the breadth, the depth of really everything that we are doing. And there is a lot of the members here, panelists, and Francesca, they're going to have a deep dive again on this topic in 10 minutes, I think 11:50.
Yeah, roughly 10 minutes. And in the next one, which is the deep dive, we will have somebody from Starkware, and then also smart contract wallets, Argent and Gnosis, and also people from tooling again, OpenZeppelin and also Tenderly. So we will focus, of course, on different topics than discussed here. But if you're interested in continuing the discussion on infrastructure security, there's lots of more things to discuss there. Join us in the ISAL, right?
Yes.
Cool.
So
thank you.
You have to get a bit of a quick exercise and go three flights of stairs, but that's where it's going to happen in 10 minutes. Thank you all.